As some of you may not know, I spent 2 weeks, the end of July and the beginning of August, in Alaska. I am from Alaska. I spent 5 years there, originally born in Toledo, and I felt called to go back and go on these missions trips. My first missions trip was to Kaktovik, and that's very tip top of Alaska right there. And some history about the Alaskan people is in World War II, the American soldiers came into these villages because this was their last line of defense to Russia. The natives to these villages do not particularly like white people, because in Kaktovik, we came in and we demolished their whole historical village because that was the best place to put a runway. So when white people show up, it's very negative aspect of who's coming in. And Kaktovik itself is an island. It's actually all ice, and the runway is only that the United States military built is only about a foot above sea level. So getting in and out of it is very hard, and you only have about a 3-hour window for planes to come in and out. And if the runway has been flooded, you can only get in by a bush plane. So when we arrived a day late in Kaktovik, we actually were on a 7-passenger plane, and there was 6 people on our team. The only other person on the plane was the police officer that was coming in to switch out for his 2 weeks on. We were coming into a very dark island. They had just had they've had several deaths this summer. They were getting prepared for a elder who had died, and when they have a funeral, you have people coming in from all over Alaska for that funeral. So when we got onto the plane a day late, we got stuck in Dead Horse, Alaska, which is basically the oil field. The only thing there is where the slopers, the oil men, stay. So we decided to stay there for the night so we could get on the next plane. As we were getting ready to board our plane, in comes about 15 clearly Native Alaskan people. And I was the youngest one on the team. There was one girl who was 2 years older than me, and then women who we could be their kids, so we were kind of taken care of the whole time. But me and the other younger girl realized that they were coming in for the funeral. We had overheard them talking, and really felt like we probably should have given up our seats, but didn't speak up because at this point we were new with this team and we wanted to listen to our elders. So when we arrived in Kaktovik, we came to a very negative community because they felt like we should have not been there. We should have allowed their family to come in for the funeral. So, what's the next slide? So this is what Kaktovik looks like. It's an island, and these look like the mobile houses that you can put together. That's pretty much where they live, and they get around. There's trucks, but basically the trucks go out to the fishing boats, and you see a lot of four-wheelers, ATVs. This particular community had no pastor in either one of their churches. They have a Methodist church and a Assemblies of God church, and they haven't had a pastor in the either one of the churches for almost 10 years. So it's a very dark community. We stayed in what is was their church community and their parsonage. We did VBS. We could only do it for 3 days since we were in a day late. So we opened it up, got there at noon, started our VBS at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. to them at this point is early in the morning because the sun goes down at 5 and comes back up at 6 a.m. And they actually almost rotate their clock to 2 p.m. to about 2 a.m. Just so that they're there for the light time. So kids came in, about 5 kids came in. We did Daniels in the Lion's Den the first day, did crafts, did songs, kind of went out and tried to talk to some of the community members, but we weren't getting anywhere fast. The next day was the funeral, so we took that day and took it off so that way the kids could go to the community. And we did still have some kids show up. Basically, parents were sending them to us to give them a break from their parents. So we did Hermie and Wormy videos and sang songs with the kids. The following night, we had a Esther night, which is where we talked to the women about having high tea. We had a woman from Wales with us, who was a missionary there, and so she talked about what high tea was and how we are women and can be empowered by the Lord. We had 3 women and 2 young girls show up, and then the following day we had this woman come to the door during our VBS, and we weren't sure what we were going to get from her. She was in full Yupik garb and what we call a kuspik, and she goes, "The Lord told me to come in. I've been walking around this building 3 times." And so we brought her in, and we got to know Maria, who was one of the elders in the community, but her mother was the oldest woman still alive in the community. And she was still out fishing, and we got to sit and listen to all of her stories. So by being able to open up to her and let her share her stories, we then the next day almost tripled in size for our VBS. Throughout the week, we had 21 students, and they're elementary students, and there's only 31 elementary age students there. And from Maria, she said that the other ones were out on the fishing boat. So this is one of our kids. She also this is Jasmine. She came to our Esther night as well. And what we did is we had the kids sit for 3 minutes in silence, which is really hard for a 5th grader, all the way down to we had 3-year-olds that came. And then we had them draw a picture of what the Lord was saying to them. And so this is her picture. She said this is actually a depiction of what their cemetery looks like. They have just crosses, and she was related to the woman who had died. So it was really empowering to see and hear what these kids have gone through. The moment we would walk out of if we were walking around the city, the village, the moment we walked out of our door, we would have kids screaming, because we were new. They wanted to get to know us, and we were loving on them. Most of the parents, we had a graduation at the end of it, and we only had the 3 women who came to our Esther night come, and then 1 other family. And typically the families will come out for our graduation, but because of this city and this village, it's such a dark place that they didn't want to come out. Then it came for our day to leave, and we were separated on 2 different flights, and so we called to get to the airport, which is literally taking a bus out to the runway and getting on the plane, and they had canceled our flight because when we got stuck the day before, getting in, they had canceled our end time. So we got stuck for another day in Kaktovik, and actually was the best thing we could have done. We made a connection, not only spent the day with Maria and talked to her and got to know her, but also one of the big male elders came in and sat, and we played card games with him and just got to know him and talk about what we were there for. And then I was able to, some of you have seen me sign before for worship. At our graduation, I signed to Good, Good Father, and we actually had the only male that came was singing along with me. So for Kaktovik, the biggest thing they need right now is prayer for a pastor for the village. And this place is not a short-term missions trip. As we were leaving, we had just made those connections that could have expanded into a bigger, more impact on that village, but we had to leave. They need a full-time pastor and someone who can blend in with the people and understand the people. So we then went to Yakutak, which is in my next slide, I think. Yep. So this is now all the way to the bottom of Alaska, and it's connected to Alaska. It's not an island, but there's no road system to it. And we went to pretty much all 4 climates of Alaska during this time. It was icy and cold, 40 degrees up in Kaktovik, and when we got down to Yakutak, it was rainy and 50 to 60 degrees. So it was quite interesting to come from 80-degree Ohio and go there and trying to, figure out what I was going to wear. So, this one actually is Kaktovik too. So Kaktovik is a whaling village, and this is their boneyard. When they whale, they bring in their whale. They can have 3 whales a season, and their season actually just started. And this is the food they use throughout the year, because a big thing with them is getting planes in and out, which means when we arrived and the only bush planes were coming in and out, they hadn't had food come in for almost 2 weeks. Their grocery stores were bare, but most of them live off the land, and so they live off their whale meat. And so making the connections with the villagers, and also they have another runway project going on right now. There's oil workers there building that runway. Got to make connection with them as well, because Verizon doesn't work up there. And so in order to make any connection to the world, we would go up to the hotel there and connect to the internet. So I was able to make connections with some people, and right there, that little white thing is a polar bear. So we were able to go out to their boneyard, which is on the other side of their runway, and see polar bears. People pay thousands of dollars to go up at the end of September to see the polar bears. And so that was something we got to do that extra day we were there, which was nice. So, and then when we arrived in Yakutak now, this is a major white people village. They are Athabascan, which is more of a white community, and they are big fishermen. So the season was just coming to an end when we flew in, and there was 5 families, which was half of the congregation to that church, out on their fishing boats. There by the end of the thing, the whole week in our VBS, we had 30 kids out of 70 in the elementary, and the other 2 families were still out fishing. This community, it was more of a refresher for those people. They have a church, but they've had a church that their pastor has been in and out. They have a gorgeous church building that's just being built, but I mean, in Ohio standards, we wouldn't be able to have church in this building. There was open insulation everywhere. There was no running water, but they were taking this building and they were having church in it. They had a great parsonage as well. We were able to have beds, which was a big deal because I slept on the floor the whole time in Kaktovik. But we refreshed the community there because the women in that community are pretty much leading that church. And so when we had our Esther night, we had 11 women come. And a lot of them were the main women in the community. 2 of them were like our connection people, where one of them let us have her car for the whole time we were there because everything was in walking distance, but it was more like a mile and a half. So we had her car because of all the rain, which was nice. And just really got to refresh that community with something different. We led worship during their Sunday service. They also have a Assemblies of God church and a Methodist church. Neither one has a pastor as well. So we led service at both churches, and I split my time. I started with one with my Good Father sign language and then went over and ended at the other one. But again, prayer for that village in Yakutak is they had a death while we were there as well. And it was you see a division with white people and the Athabascans. We only had connection with one villager there. And they lost a big person in their community, a young man who was 25. Believe it was drugs, died because of caught fire, started cooking something. And it was by the grace of God that his young nieces and nephews were not in the home because he usually takes care of them. So it's a community that's hurting, but they also need a full-time pastor. So got to meet a lot of people, and as we were leaving one of the villages, we were getting on our airplane and just overheard someone talking. They wanted, because we stood out, we were all white, and they said, "What are you guys doing here?" And so we told them what we were doing, and they were from another village and said, God has forsaken our village. And so we made a connection for next summer and plan on going to that village next summer.